Hey everybody, I'm Lady Solavellan and welcome to my realm of purpose. I just want to quickly say that if my voice sounds weird, it's because I am still recovering from a cold, a flu, whatever the hell happened for a bit there. So, yeah. Anyway, today's video, I'm very pleased to open what I'm going to call my Veilguard era with some new Solavellan content. Today's video involves the expression of love between Solas and Lavellan and Veilguard. Mostly how he expresses his love for her, because that's worth exploring and I had so much to talk about regarding it. I've seen some discussions happen online about some people's takes on how Solavellan was handled in Veilguard, of which there are very many takes. Some I agree with and some I don't. Today I want to go over the idea I've seen floating around that Lavellan gives up everything for Solas, whilst Solas doesn't really provide anything in the way of gestures of his love and devotion for Lavellan. He comes across as a man who needs to be saved by a sacrificial woman figure for him to find redemption, whilst he himself does little to nothing to offer change on his side for her. And I just completely disagree with this. I don't think we played the same game, or maybe I just overanalyze. Some of you know what I'm like. If you look at their relationship only from what was shown in Veilguard, and you aren't an analytical psychopath like me, it does come across as woman makes the sacrifice for a man that you do typically see in fictional media. I suppose you could take that as some kind of misogynist take, but I never got that. I feel like Lavellan ultimately felt like a very powerful, heroic figure. In Inquisition, all of that, I feel like she has done her part to prove she is not the damsel in distress. She is not a sacrificial lamb of sorts to elevate some other character. She is more so complementary to the people around her, including Solas, whether you romance him or not. So yeah, I have to disagree with some people's takes that it just felt like an unequal relationship. I don't get it. I've tried to understand, I just don't get it. To try and summarize what I want to go over in this video, because I don't think I've made it perfectly clear quite yet, is how much Solas was giving to Lavellan as an alternative to giving her a life with him, as revealed by Veilguard. Because from what was shown, there wasn't very much Solavellan content in the game. And what was shown has been interpreted by some people to be either lackluster or she's doing a hell of a lot for him compared to what he's doing for her. And as I said, I disagree with this, so I want to do a video talking about that. Firstly, we need to go over what actually happened in Veilguard, because this video is... you'll see. Solas was willing to go to the Regret prison by himself. And I'm 99% sure it was the Regret prison that he goes to at the end of the game. Because where else is he going to go? The previous prison was being destroyed. I'll do a video on that. That's... just considered that, and that's a headache. Solas is willing to go to the Regret prison by himself. He does not hesitate from the moment he is convinced there's another way. He closes his eyes as he takes one last look at Lavellan, and keeps his eyes closed as he turns to go, because he wants her to be the last thing he sees in this world. And as he goes, so willingly, he doesn't ask her to come with him. He doesn't hesitate in going alone to pay the price for everything that's happened, to him and because of him. And he breaks as she chooses to go with him anyway. She takes the initiative of saying, "I am going with you." And he has to tell her outright in this shattered voice, "Where I'm going is terrible," and cries when she answers, "I go where you go, forever." I think they equally express a desire to spare the other from a horrible fate, and together they find this beautiful middle ground for the conclusion of their relationship. They step through into a not-so-terrible place because they are together. Which brings us to the main point of this video. What the character Solas intended to happen, rather than what did happen. Solas expected to die rehousing the gods and bringing down the veil, and prepared for this inevitability by leaving Lavellan all his worldly and otherworldly possessions, thus showing even if he did go through with his plans and abandoned her, he did. He abandoned her for like 10 years, refused to let her come with him, refused to give up his plans, and then he was just gonna be gone from her life forever. Even so, he still expressed his eternal love for her. Obviously, I'm not gonna leave it at that, those statements need some backing up. To address, Solas expected to die, and he probably would have had the ritual been completed, and if he didn't, he'd probably be in a catatonic state for millennia again. But I think it far more likely that this ritual would have just killed him. The evidence. Solas's word choice during the trespasser interaction, which always stuck with me since the first moment I heard it. There are two versions of this dialogue, from a Solas romanced inquisitor and a non-Solas romanced inquisitor. Let's go over the non-romanced dialogue first. The inquisitor offers to help Solas, which he refuses regardless. And they respond with, "I would give my life for that." And Solas's conclusive statement is, "There is no glory here, only a price I alone will pay." To me this means, along with giving up everything and everyone else he holds dear, Solas is willing and accepting to pay a price for what he aims to accomplish. And he states, a price. No glory, no righteousness, only a price. And this just speaks to me as death. Think of Varric and the ultimate sacrifice. He's the one who paid the final price. Those kind of word choices that kind of hint towards, when we speak of the price in fiction, it almost always means something entirely drastic, particularly in these kinds of situations, a person's life. Especially since Solas says this in response to Inquisitor offering to give their life for his cause. Now, to address the romance dialogue, it's impossible not to think of Solas's greatest fear when Lavellan says, "I can't bear to think of you alone," his greatest fear being dying alone. With that in mind, along with Solas's next line, "I walk the Dinan Shiral, there is only death on this journey." This speaks volumes to Solas's mentality, his emotional state, and his expectations of what will be the end result for himself. Death, and if not death, close enough. As he says, "I would not have you see what I become." And as we know now, Solas is a spirit, and I imagine her seeing him completely corrupted from his own purpose, wisdom, going on this path of bloodshed and regret and duty, against better judgment, purely for the sake of relieving himself of his own guilt, of performing this duty to honour his friend. It's not particularly wise, because it will lead to his own destruction, one way or another. It must be an absolute worst case scenario for him regardless. Barefaced but free, frolicking, fierce. He wants to give wisdom, not orders. He broke the dreams to stop the old dreams from waking. The wolf chews its own leg off to escape the trap. Solas wants freedom, not just for himself, but for others. It's one of the things he values most in the world. And he is completely in a state of believing the world sits on his shoulders alone, both for the good reasons and the bad reasons. He is walking the tightrope between villain and hero. He wants to be the hero, but history seems to be pulling him in the direction of villain. And he believes the weight of all of that is on his shoulders. In fact, that actually speaks volumes to his character and its development, because the best ending possible for him was always going to be to take that weight off his shoulders. It is not your fault, you need to let it go. Or, it is your fault, you're going to hold on to this forever, and he goes down the route of Elgurnan. It is he who must change, he who must bear the burdens of it all, and he loses a piece of himself each time he makes that sacrifice. Playing the hero actively has done nothing good for him in his life. Wisdom becomes pride, and pushed too far. What then does pride become? Corruption and death, literally and symbolically. He tells her no, not only because he doesn't want the love of his life, the thing he values most in this life, you could argue, to see the absolute worst of him. Not only because he doesn't want the love of his life, to see the absolute worst of him, but because he doesn't want to see her like that either. He wants to spare her from corruption and death through his journey, his mistakes, his actions, his choices. Because he knows he has done this to others, as we see through the memories, as we have seen through other examples. On this journey he is taking, there is nothing he won't sacrifice. For Veilguard we see he is willing to betray himself in that regard. He does blood magic on a person. He doesn't just trick them, he is willing to lie at this point outright, and do so successfully. Think about what he did to Varric, think about what he did to Rook. He used blood magic on Rook, not only to maintain that connection, but to lock them in the prison he built for gods, like unimaginable hell, realistically, for eternity. And at this point, we don't know if Rook would have been in there forever. Rook even expresses this fear. In fact, as he says in Trespasser, he describes what he did to the Evanur. He describes it as eternal torment. This is something he did to someone he respected. And then you think of what he did to Felisan, the spirits that he tricked into attacking Elgrenan's citadel, purely so they could be a distraction. He is willing to do atrocious things to people he cares about, let alone his enemies. He does not want to do that to Lavellan. And it's not entirely out of place for him as a former spirit, as the Codex entry for a Pride Demon interestingly says. While the demons of desire largely engage in the bribery of mortals, Pride will use mortals' own best nature against them. Clever men outwit themselves, strong men crush themselves, humble men forget themselves, jealous men fear themselves. They turn corruption and ruin into an art. I want to reiterate, Solas does not want to do this, especially to someone he loves. Someone who he has called a rare and marvellous spirit.
I am sorry your friend died, Solas.
Thank you, Cole.
I didn't know there were spirits of wisdom.
There are few. Spirits form as a reflection of this world and its passions. We will never lack for spirits of rage, or hunger, or desire. The world gives them plenty to mirror. The gentler spirits are far more rare. We can ill afford the loss of even one spirit of wisdom, or faith, or compassion.
I will try not to die.
Do that, please.
Now, to address the letter from a Romance Solas to Lavellan in Veilguard. Notes from the Inquisition. Vanan, I do not know if you will see these words. My ritual is ready, and will soon be set in motion. Perhaps when you read this, the world will be as it once was, and you will see why all I did was necessary. I cannot ask your forgiveness, but I hope you come to understand. That night in Crestwood, when I shared the truth about your Valentine, you do not know how close I came to breaking. I could have shared the truth, or even put my plans aside and simply stayed with you as Solas, as I wanted. I regret the pain I caused you. What I feel for you will never change. The note is unsigned, but the handwriting is Solas's. And now we cry. Rook, receives this letter in the Codex entries after talking with the Inquisitor post Blood of Arlafan, in which you both discuss Solas and follow the route of the Trespasser decision to redeem him or stop him. Every romance gets a different letter for the Inquisitor's partner, with the exception of an Inquisitor who romanced no one, in which case the letter will be from Varric. Solas's letter, if we compare it to the others, is understandably heartbreaking. There is no catharsis in this, it is just heartbreak. There is just tragedy. While the others promise their support to the Inquisitor, as well as affirm their love, Solas's letter is nothing but regret, an apology of sorts. It's dripping with not just the affirmation of his feelings after all this time. He is still telling her, my feelings for you have not changed. I can't ask for forgiveness, but I need you to understand. Overall, it's to make Lavellan feel as though it wasn't a lie. Even though what he was going to do, he knew was against her wishes, and he would hurt her in the same way. These don't come across as words written by someone who expects to ever see their love again, even though he visited her in dreams the last decade. On top of all that, it starts out with these 2 paragraphs, these very lengthy explanations. And then the last 2 paragraphs are just 2 sentences, as if he's losing the will to keep up with something more elaborate. And your eyes are drawn to those last 2 sentences, to the point that the first 2 paragraphs feel more like footnotes, and it hits you, the importance of what he really wants to say, ultimately. It's not an explanation or a hope for the future. It's goodbye. The last thing before we move on is the simple fact that the last time Solas attempted a ritual of this scale, it took almost everything from him. As we can even see from the mural, he depicts himself as breaking, being shattered. He passed out for thousands of years as a result, both to recuperate his body and his powers. And it very nearly killed him last time. You can hear him screaming in pain. In Inquisition and even in Veilguard, I'd say Solas is not the same level of power he once was. He's looking for absolution at this point too, whereas before he was fighting for something. Before the Veil, Solas feels optimistic, if that makes sense. Whereas where we see him in Inquisition, Trespasser, Veilguard, he feels more like he's trying to find an end point. It doesn't feel optimistic anymore. It feels more like this is someone who has dealt with a great deal of hurt, a great deal of guilt. It feels like he's tired and he just wants it all to go away. I can't emphasize enough how much that breaks my heart, but especially when you sit and think about that for a bit, because thousands of years of dealing with all of that. Some of the reactions of some of the companions is so frustrating. Like, dude, you're like 30. This guy's like several thousand years old and he's done some terrible things. Terrible things have happened to him. Can you give him a break for a minute? Anyway, it all hints to me that Solas is looking for an end. He's saying his goodbyes and performing one last duty before he goes. One he hopes will absolve him of all his wrongdoings. And even if it doesn't, he's not going to be around to be able to live with the consequence anymore. I feel like he doesn't want to deal with any more consequence because everything we know of him has been action, consequence, and it's not really turned out well for him, has it? He's someone who doesn't want to hurt anymore, and perhaps we can reason that he knows his plan's sour. It's a learned behaviour at this point. He has wisdom, and what he has learned through his experiences is there are joys in life, but ultimately all he has ever done has caused pain to others. That whatever victories he claims, he believes himself incapable of change or growth. He believes himself destined to hurt and be hurt. Pride, no longer wisdom. No longer a spirit or guide or peaceful observer of the world. He is tired of fighting, tired of the trauma, tired of the blood on his hands. Totally not gonna cry. So what's the point of me bringing all this up? I want to establish that there's good reason to believe that Solas expects to die. And with that comes a situation that needs to be addressed if we're going to consider what Solavellan was in Veilguard, particularly with how Solas felt on his end of that relationship at this stage. Having been in love with her now for 10 years, he never stopped loving her. It was one of the few entirely positive things in his life. As we know, Solas does not die in Veilguard, as Rook is involved in disrupting the ritual, throwing Solas' plans into chaos. But we have to disregard that for this what-if situation. The intended situation. Which I feel we need to delve into, otherwise it feels like we're robbing a character of their agency. This is Solas' agency. This is what he intended to happen. When playing as Rook, you quickly find yourself in the lighthouse, Solas' home and base of operations during his rebellion against the Evanuris. There are countless memories and indications of the life he lived that Rook can discover and speculate on, namely the murals surrounding the library, all depicting his greatest regrets. To unlock these regrets, the player must find wolf statuettes.
I think that's it. The memory ends here.
Solas always cared about fighting injustice. He used to be a hero. He still thinks he is.
Couldn't last, could it?
And now, all that's left is this fragment. Come on, let's go.
Poor Solas. He's just doing his best.
To place before the murals to observe the memories. There are 6 in total. 3 you find by travelling the crossroads and finding memory bubbles that Rook gets to walk through and experience from another's perspective, kind of like in a dream. 2 have been found by your enemies in the game and are hidden in the crossroads, and 1 was given to the Inquisitor, which they then give to Rook. This is very important, because while Rook has access to the lighthouse and the crossroads via the Lavellan network, they cannot unlock any of the murals without the Inquisitor's statuette. Even if the player finds 5 out of 6 statuettes, none of them can be placed to unlock the murals that showcase Solas's regrets and the truth about his past and true nature, not until the Inquisitor hands over the one that they received.
She did not come all this way to leave you with empty words, however. She brought something no one else could.
A wolf statuette. We've found others like it in the crossroads. Where'd you find yours?
I found it right around the time Solas's ritual failed, when he was pulled into the Fade. We've examined the magic, and it's tied to the veil. To him. Somehow.
Solas is ancient, and his magic is part of him in a way far beyond that of mortals. I suggest you take it to the crossroads and see if something in the lighthouse calls to it. Perhaps it will yield some insight into your new ally.
I also want to point out that 5 of these statuettes were placed throughout the crossroads to be found. They weren't exactly hidden in some secret vault or anything. It's as if they were placed to be found, is what I want to say. Almost like an Easter egg hunt. It's almost playful, you could argue. Whether that's purely for a gameplay mechanic, or there was meant to be something deeper you could get from that, who knows. But the Inquisitor was specifically given one. One that unlocks the rest. And once again, this may be just a gameplay mechanic that to introduce the Inquisitor, but I feel like, to me at least, as someone who likes to analyse, I feel like there's a greater meaning behind this, especially when you compare it with how the dialogue was written in this scene. Dialogue analysis, oh, Morrigan, someone who knows a great deal more than anyone else, with or without Mathal's memories, tells Rook and the player that the Inquisitor brought something that no one else could. In this playthrough, I'd already found other statuettes, and the characters do address that. So she can't mean that it's just any statuette, because we've already found some. She has to mean this specific one has significance, and it was the Inquisitor who found it. She states, "I found it," not we as in her and her people, which she says just after about examining it. The Inquisitor is the one to have found this statuette, implying it was intended to fall into her lap, not merely the Inquisition's, or someone else's. To look back to what I said before, the others were scattered around at random as if it was an Easter egg hunt for someone to find. It feels like it was meant for her.
I suggest you take it to the crossroads and see if something in the lighthouse calls to it. Perhaps it will yield some insight into your new ally.
This solidifies to me, with the knowledge that we already have the statuettes, that this statuette is the first one, the key, if you will. The others only work if this one is placed. In addition to this, the way the dialogue and the rest of the scene plays out, only with a romance Lavellan in mind, she seems to talk as if something very private and delicate is going to be found. As a result of Rook discovering something behind the statuettes, even mentions that Solas was important to her. Something that later in the story Rook seems to find out when Lavellan outright tells her.
How many of his names do you know? God of Lies, Dreadwolf, Fen'Harel. They're titles he earned from enemies, followers, and fractured history. He and I shared another name. Vanan. Your heart. He meant that much? Yes, he did.
In addition to this, the implication that Rook doesn't know about them throughout the story until she's explicitly told, at least to the degree of, oh, you two were serious, especially a Dalish or Veil-jumper Rook, says a lot about how private Solas and Lavellan kept their relationship, which is surprising but also not at the same time. My point in bringing this up is to say how desperate and frustrated Lavellan is at this point, that she basically hints at being Fen'Harel's lover, the enemy, not just of this game, but of their very lore, as a Dalish. It feels like she says this as a brace for what Rook might find out through the statuette she's handing over. Not only that, but she's still thinking of him so deeply that she hasn't lost that connection to him, believing he hasn't lost that connection to the point she thinks she's relevant enough to him, and a possible weakness of his, to bring up her feelings of him in the first place, that is what might be revealed to Rook through these statuettes. Doubly so since she finds out that she's the only one who was pretty much given one, or perhaps she merely hopes that's so, as she later mentions that perhaps she's arrogant enough to believe she, a mortal who once wandered the wilderness with misremembered history, was important to someone with a name like Pride. Someone who has lived thousands of years and was regarded as a god, who to some degree believes himself to be a god. So then, does she hand over the statuette, not just because she had other duties in the south, but also because she was afraid that perhaps she didn't mean that much to him? Perhaps that's the reason why she never once entered the lighthouse. She didn't want to find out that she had nothing to do with those murals, which she didn't. She wasn't a weakness of his, he didn't care. Or perhaps it would hurt more to see that he was pining for her just as much as she was him. And he still didn't choose her. The longing and anguish from Lavellan was very well written to me, especially in just how much he seems to feel a connection to the statuette, to his essence that clings to it, compared to the other Inquisitors who actually don't say anything about it. She says, it feels like a part of him. Only a Romance Lavellan says that. It's like losing a loved one and then finding something of theirs after years of grieving and trying to let go. It hurts, and I just want to point out how beautiful this is to try and convey in fiction. It's done so well. BioWare writers, you got me. So not only did Morrigan essentially confirm that this statuette is the key, but also Lavellan states that she found it around the time that the ritual failed, when Solas was pulled into the prison. This seems to imply not only was it sent to her to find, as in it was intended for her to have, this key to unlocking the truth, as any Inquisitor is given. But compared to Rook, who had to hunt around to find the others, she got hers pretty much instantly. Which tells us that Solas intended it that way, intended the Inquisitor to find out first. And it seems to have been triggered by his disappearance / disconnection from the world. So did the spirits put it there for her to find? Did an agent? Did he personally place it? And I can't emphasize enough, it is the first statuette, the key, and it's like it's been bestowed upon the Inquisitor, and that's just, as you can probably tell, that's so fascinating to me. Last thing before moving forward, I want to point out how well this works in tandem with a romanced Lavellan, who suddenly is no longer being visited by her lover in her dreams. And I'm willing to bet that he would have made sure that she never had nightmares, being her personal guardian in the Fade to scare off any demons or terrible manifestations. Every now and then she caught sight of him watching her from across the distance, likely wondering every time she noticed him if she'd take another step towards him, or would she one day turn away, finally telling him no more. And you can probably tell by the tone of my voice that this genuinely breaks my heart to think about. Just the thought of her no longer seeing him finally, once and for all, bereft of him. At this point, Lavellan probably thinks he's either dead or he's finally decided he's had enough of her. She's probably having nightmares for the first time in nearly 10 years. Of course, in Veilguard, Lavellan continues without him. She isn't completely dependent on him. She continues forth. She's the one holding the South together. She's the one everyone has turned to. Everyone goes to Skyhold, her base of operations. She is still a character with her own agency at this point. She has her own power. It's not like she breaks without him. She has her own power, her own agency. I want to emphasize that because it bothers me that people seem to think Lavellan is this delicate little thing when she's just a person like any other Inquisitor, like any other character in this universe. She's not lost and alone, and she's powerful. She's a very powerful heroine. It doesn't need to be stated outright for it to be understood. Going forward, unless Rook encourages her to continue searching for her love, in which case they reunite and go off to spend eternity together in the prison, unless Lavellan is encouraged, she's willing to accept that he's gone and he didn't choose her. That scene itself wasn't necessarily about Lavellan lacking her own agency to get up and go do something, to choose one way or another. She's, at this point, she's expressing a longing to still be with him, but she does express anger, she does express sadness. She is saying, I'm at the point where I'm going to give up on him. Because you need to keep in mind, Rook may not know at this point that Varric's dead. Lavellan does. So she's asking Rook in this scene, is Solas still Solas? She knows what happened during the Blood of Arlathan. She knows that Solas helped them get out of there, but she wants to know, someone who knows Solas a lot more intimately than, I guess, your average person, is he still Solas? Did he do that purely because he's this goal-fueled villain who sees this as just another step in his plans, or did he do it because he's still wise and compassionate? And depending on Rook, your Rook's personality, you can tell him, yeah, no, he's still an asshole. Or you can tell her, he did it because he is still the person you love. Is how I interpreted that scene. It's Lavellan asking, is he still the person I love? It's dependent on Rook, because Rook now knows who he is. She hasn't spoken to Solas since Trespasser. She hasn't actually been near him since she needs to know from someone who has spoken to him, interacted with him. Is he someone worthy of being saved? Is he someone worthy of being loved at this point? Because I don't know who he is anymore. I'm scared I don't know who he is anymore. This is why Rook gives their input on that. Solas did not ask her to join him at any point. Not in Inquisition, not in Trespasser, not in Veilguard. At any point. If he is convinced to seek atonement, he doesn't hesitate as he takes on this one last burden alone, and turns to leave, taking one last look at Lavellan before closing his eyes, once again, because he wants her to be the last thing he sees in this life. But she follows and he's completely in awe of her. You can see the love in his expression, the hint of bafflement that after everything she would still choose to follow him. Something that Mythal never did, something that almost no one did for him. That whatever doubts and anger she had, she loves him no less than before all of these revelations. Which I want to emphasise, Lavellan should have been in the lighthouse at some point because there's no confirmation. In fact, there is no indication that Lavellan even knows he was a spirit. Lavellan didn't see the murals. BioWare! That is my only complaint about the Solavellan content in Veilguard. Lavellan, in canon, never found out that he's a spirit. She never found out about all the Mythal stuff. Anyway, all of this is thanks to Rook, who, despite being betrayed and hurt by Solas, in honestly a way that almost made me go, you're not getting a happy ending, sir. Rook still chose to empathise with him, to try and tell him that he's loved in all these different ways, as a father, friend, brother kind of figure to Morrigan, as a, I can't believe I'm going to use this term unironically, but a frenemy to Rook, as a boyfriend, husband / pet wolf to Lavellan, to remind him of something he's been denied almost all his life, that he has a choice. But what if Rook never stopped the ritual? What did Inquisitor finding the statuette indicate towards Solas's intentions? Hence the what if. Well, what happened to Rook on their journey involving Solas? Rook was never intended to inherit Solas's lighthouse, or his Lavellan network, or anything else. Rook was a random nobody. Solas doesn't give a damn about Rook. Solas was leaving it to the Inquisitor.
voice ringing with fullness from both worlds, guiding me to the shining places. He calls himself Pride.
What do you sense when you focus on me?
You're too bright. Like counting birds against the sun. The mark makes you more, but past it, pulled. Blood that is not blood, a tiny trace of time. Lips struggling to shape language your parents lived. And past that, the weight of all on you. All the hopes you carry, fears you fight. You are theirs. It must be very hard. I hope I help.
Behold, worthy ones, the woman who blazes like fire and mends the air.
You've spoken to him in your dreams. You felt the power of that mind. His love could burn against me like a bonfire. He seemed so kind, and wise, and sad, and looked at me as if I somehow mattered more than anything around us. For a time, I thought I would have followed anywhere he asked me to.
He was leaving it to someone he shared a genuine connection with. The woman who blazes like fire, a beacon to the spirits of the Fade. The one who encourages the best in him, a hope for love that burns like a bonfire. Lavellan was to be the lady of the lighthouse. And it's just so Solas to be that poetic. And I'm positive that Lavellan would have caught on to that too. It would have been equally tragic as it was heartwarming, I feel. At least in a fictional sense. I don't know. Realistically, this is... Oh. Real relationships don't work like this, guys. But it's so romantic. Let's also consider that if the ritual had been completed, the veil would have come down, and Lavellan, along with all the other elves, would have been immortal, is what was implied. So Solas, in total, was gifting her the lighthouse, his alluvian, and therefore the crossroads and his entire alluvian network, his treasures, secrets, and fortune, a permanent home that needs no upkeep or maintenance, that shapes to the intent of its occupants, of which we don't know how many it could occupy, probably quite a good few. And of course immortality to spend with all of that, in place of a brief life with him, in which he would have not only had to endure her mortality and her eventual death, but an eternity of her absence. And above all else, he was gifting her what she always wanted, what he always wanted to give her, the truth. Again, this is equally as romantic as it's frustratingly tragic, because of course, he does love her, and desired the best for her, but that means he thought the best thing for her was a life without him in this world. Among many reasons, I think this is why Solas always left himself a plan B, longing for her to defy his plans, to see if she would always follow him, to stop him, to tell him, actually, fuck all that, I choose you. I imagine you're likely thinking at this point, but doesn't Solas leave the statuette to every Inquisitor, not just to romance Lavellan? To which I have to say, yes, he does. However, hear me out on this. A rival Inquisitor was someone who despised Solas and what he represented, a love of lore, hunting for knowledge, and having deep and open conversations. Sorry guys, that's the truth. If you had a rival Inquisitor, they probably did not give a shit about helping people or doing things, they just wanted to get things done, and probably for their own benefits. That was the point of that route for that character. Rival Inquisitor is not someone who would listen to Solas or try to solve things on their own. Now imagine the world that's just had the veil removed. Many people die in the chaos, and Rival Inquisitor finds a random wolf statuette. Realistically, would they be the kind of person to pursue that? Would Morrigan, or spirits, or Solas's remaining agents bother to help Rival Inquisitor to work that out? They would very much likely be on their own to solve that, amidst all the chaos that's just unfurled. On top of that, they have a guaranteed higher chance of not being immortal, since only a Lavellan would then be immortal to have all the time necessary to pursue this. You have all these other Inquisitors that have a possibility for this outcome. Only a romanced Inquisitor would have that kind of connection to pursue that on that level, if that makes sense. I see it as either Solas leaving one last mockery to an Inquisitor he hates, or leaving one last drop of hope to encourage their curiosity, to try and explain to them why he is the way he is. At its core, leaving this key to the Inquisitor, even one he despised and despised him, was Solas acting out his nature, to offer wisdom, to find a connection, to allow someone the tool to learn and grow, despite him knowing better. Of course, in this alternate universe, only a Lavellan would have the immortality to pursue this to its full extent. Friend Inquisitor is someone who, similar to a romanced Inquisitor, Solas got along with rather handsomely. I don't really know the vibe of this relationship too well, since if I'm on Solas' good side, I'm probably romancing him in a playthrough. But a friend Inquisitor is someone Solas respects. It's someone who spoke to him, cared about him, and shared his values. Solas gives to a friend Inquisitor what he gave to a romance one. It's a matter of Solas believing they could do well with this gift, this opportunity, even if they lacked the immortality to pursue it. Or they did, if they were a Lavellan. Can we consider for a moment a Lavellan who didn't romance Solas, who would have outlived romances like Cullen or Josephine, who were human? Imagine them having non-elven children, and would have to outlive them too. I feel like there are so few happy endings in this universe. And we arrive at the romanced Inquisitor, someone he gifted all of this to, who loved him, who he loved, who would now have to endure the loss of her dwarven, Kunari and human friends as time passed. The context shifts with Lavellan because she saw the most of Solas, as unguarded as possible, and she loved him for who he was. The lighthouse becomes something else compared to the other two, as well as the note he left her. It's a much more intimate experience then. With him with that state of mind, he couldn't be with her as Solas, as he wanted, but he could give her every opportunity to live a good and fulfilling life, to help her people, to help spirits, to learn and grow and try if she could to find happiness in a world without him, with the murals, writing and wolf statuettes to remember him by. The meaning changes with the romance Lavellan, because it would mean something deeper to her compared to the others. In another world, Rook never stopped the ritual, Solas died, and Lavellan became the Lady of the Lighthouse, with limitless power and a limitless life, and to an immortal being who believes he's beyond saving, that is what he gifts to his heart. And that is all we have for today, guys. Thank you so much for your time and your patience. I hope you enjoyed the video. One last minute addition is the Happy Valentine's Day. I'm actually super happy I managed to get this out somewhat soonish. I've just been dealing with a lot on my plate lately, so this video took quite a while to do. Like I said, I'm really happy with it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.